Peace, peace, peace. So I'm on Instagram and YouTube, so you'll see me looking at both cameras. Today we're going to talk about fractional reserve banking. Um, we are going to be using the following reference points. Are you confused about law? Moorish dominions, and Muslim versus Muslim. These three books you can get on riseofthemoors.org. We'll also be using the American Constitutional Interpretation, right? Yeah, American Constitutional Interpretation, second edition, by Walter Murphy, James Fleming, and Sodarius Barber. We might also be using Black's Law Dictionary, fourth edition, and maybe Black's Law Dictionary, fifth edition. I also have printouts from different websites. I also have this printout from chroniclingamerica.loc.gov, so it's from the Library of Congress. I also have several certified documents from the Library of Congress. This one, and to get documents from the Library of Congress, you can go to the website or just Google search loc.gov duplication services, and you can get anything. You can get maps. You can get the, as an example, there's a map of North America before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, and you'll see that Mexico was the entire West Coast. So you can get that certified from Congress. This one is the proceedings of the 116th Congress, first session, pages 1 to 8 of House Resolution 25. And so when you go to Library of Congress / duplication services, when you Google search that, and you go to the duplication services, it'll ask you if you want documents, transcripts, it'll ask you whatever you want. I believe these are documents that I believe I click documents or transcripts. They'll figure it out. A clerk will contact you. And then you literally just type in, as an example, proceedings of the 116th Congress first session, pages 1 to 8 of House Resolution 25. If you want it certified with the seal, right, so it comes bound with these gold or brass staples, so that way the assistant business enterprise officer, Rosalina Jones, the way she put it together is the way I received it, and I didn't alter it. I didn't take these out and add anything else. And of course, it comes with a clear sheet to protect the documents, and then it has the seal with the ribbon. So that way you see this isn't a paper like printed copy. This is actually sealed from the Library of Congress. And then the seal itself is from the Library of Congress. All right, so you can get documents not sealed and it'll be cheaper. I believe it's 25 notes per seal. And then I think it's after 10 pages, the prices go up. So it does cost, sometimes it'll cost a lot depending on what you get. If you get a bunch of documents at once, then obviously you're going to be in the hundreds, 200s, 300s, depending on how many you get at a time. But when you add the certification and the seal and the wet ink signature, that costs more. This is the Public Statutes at Large of the United States of America, and the attached photocopies from Volume 8 of the title pages and page 100 through 105, on which appears the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States of America and His Imperial Majesty the Emperor of Morocco, January 1787. That's also sealed and certified by Congress. This is proceedings of the 115th Congress, second session, House Resolution 5404, pages 1 to 4. This is Congressional Record, Proceedings and Debates of the 90th Congress, First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967. Pages 15640 through 15646. Yeah, 15646. Yeah, I said that right. This is Statutes at Large of the United States of America from March 1933 to June 1934. Uh, this is volume 48, Public Laws and pages 1727 to 1728, on which appears Proclamation 270. So this is Proclamation 270 of December 30th, 1933. This is a case. This is from United States Reports, volume 429. Justice of the Supreme Court notes pages 569 through 588. This is the case itself, though. So you can just look it up. This cover page says, and I'll show, once I finish, there's two more left. Once I finish with all the reference documents, I'll show you them as I go through them when I go through them. United States Reports, volume 429, case adjudged in the United States Supreme Court at October term 1976, beginning of the term October 4th, 1976 through February 22nd, 1977. Henry Pulitzer Jr., reporter of decisions. Then it has all the justices at the time. This is Don E. Williams, Co. versus Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Certiorari to the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, number 75-1312, argued December 8th, 1976, decided February 22nd, 1977. This is the public papers and addresses of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Executive Order 6102, April 5th, 1933. And this last one is United States Code 2012 edition. I believe it's Title 12. Yeah, Title 12, Banks and Banking. And then I have subsection 411, issuance to reserve banks, nature of obligation, and redemption. So these are the documents that I have. These are the documents that I'm referencing. Again, you can get documents certified from the Library of Congress yourself at library, I think it's loc.gov/duplication services. So today we're going to talk about fractional reserve banking. And it may sound complicated, but it's not. What it is in the name itself, fractional reserve banking. So we know what fractions are based, we all had math class in high school, or we should have had math class in high school. And for those who dropped out of high school, a fraction is essentially a piece of a whole. So if we have a slice of pizza and we share half of it, the fraction is 1/2. So you get half and I get half. So a fraction is not a whole. It's not the whole of a thing. It's a portion of it. That's what a fraction is. Reserve is something that is not being used. So when you have a savings account, those are your reserves. If you have extra food stored somewhere, those are your reserves. If you have anything that is extra, anything that's not being used, is reserve. And then, of course, we have banking. Banking has, when we look at like what we refer to as the conscious community or whatever you want to call it, banking, the word bank has been referred to as bench. The word bank can refer to, when you look at like a lake or a river, the sides of it, the sides of the river bank, right? The sides of it that go up, that's the bank. So a bank is something that holds something in, right? So the banks of a river hold the bounds of the river. So a bank, as it relates to money or Federal Reserve notes, is what holds the Federal Reserve notes or holds the flow of Federal Reserve notes, just like the banks of a river control the flow of the river. Without the bank, then the river would just dissipate into the land adjacent to it, right? So fractional reserve banking is essentially a regulation that the United States federal government, through capitalism, has placed on banks. And it basically states that banks need to have, or only need to have, is what I should say, a minimum of 10% of their assets, essentially. So if they have, if a bank, if all of us, right, there's 32 people on YouTube and there's 10 people on Instagram. So if all 42 of us come together, we put our money together, and we raise $10,000, or let's say we raise $200,000, and we form a bank, we only have to keep 20,000 in the bank. That would be 10%. The rest we can loan out, right? So what they do is they'll keep the $20,000 as the reserves. That's a fraction of the 200,000. So now you see the fractional reserve. They keep the 10% in the bank just in case people want to withdraw their money, which normally they don't do. And then they have measures to ensure that that doesn't happen. And we all know this measure. If you go to the bank and you try to withdraw 5,000 of your dollars or more, they have to report that because it's not your money. It's not money. And they have to ensure that when they're dealing with their fractional reserve system, they're not going less than the 10%, and they're making sure that you don't withdraw that 10% that's there as the reserves, because they need that as the show money. And an example of that, if you read the Rex 84 plan, the King Alfred plan, you'll see where John D. Rockefeller talked about this, when they use other people's money to show that, okay, yeah, we do have assets when they really don't. So again, fractional reserve banking is they keep a fraction of the amount of money that they claim to have, and they loan out the rest. So how this works is they're essentially creating money on top of money, which is credit, and then the liability is essentially on the people taking out the loan, and then they're receiving the real money, even though they never really had any money to begin with, right? So I start off with 200,000. They only have to keep 20,000. So what's 200,000 minus 20,000? What is that? That's $180,000. So they can loan out the rest of the 180,000 in however amount of increments that they want, and they only have to keep 10% of that. So let's say, they have the 200,000, they loan out 1,000 of it to somebody. They only have to keep 10% of that $1,000 in the reserves, right? But in the loan that you get from them, they attach what is called insurance, right? Now, insurance isn't essentially bad. What's bad is usury. So ensuring that you're going to pay me back is not bad. But when I put a monetary value on it, I give you 1,000, you have to give me 1,500, you have to give me 2,000, you have to give me 3,000. That's usury. In Islam, as an example, that is forbidden. And in the Quran, as an example, Allah says, people will say business and commerce is usury, but it's not. It says in the Quran that Allah specifically forbid usury and allows commerce. Commerce is essentially fair exchange, fair trade. If I loan you $100, I loaned you 100, you give me 100 back. I'm not making money off of you. It's a loan. It's here. This is to help you. You do whatever it is you need to do, and then you pay me back. And that's good business. That's fair trade. That's fair. I gave you 100, I get 100 back. That's an even exchange that meets all the requirements of contracting, which in contracting you have to something called legal or lawful consideration, which is something of value that both parties either accept is of value or according to the law is of value. So if we exchange in rocks and you acknowledge that, okay, this rock is worth, pebble, this rock is worth $10, and I'm giving you a rock, then you associate that rock with $10. So in return, you give me the same rock based on the weight of that rock. So this is where we deal with weights and measures. And originally, that rock essentially was gold when we deal with equity. But anyway, I don't want to get too far down that track. So what happens is when they only keep 10% of the reserve, they're essentially creating more money out of nothing, right? Because if I'm loaning you out, and we'll apply it to the context of a house, right? If I've already given out $200,000 loans based off of nothing, because when you apply for the loans, they never give you cash, even though we already know that cash isn't money. They never give you anything. It's always just, here's a piece of paper, or here's this digital thing that represents this number that doesn't really exist. Then they give you an asset. And what they do with the asset is they securitize the loan with the asset. So to ensure that they get their $200,000 back from you, they will have you put up your house as collateral. And that's essentially what they just keep doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And it's kind of difficult to explain as far as, because I don't know what all 40 of you or 50 of you people don't know. So it's very hard to explain which aspects, to go into detail in, and which access to which to not go into detail in. But essentially, if I give you $1 as a loan, I keep 10% of that in the reserves, and then I essentially loan out the rest of that dollar. I just keep loaning it out, even though I don't have it. But since I don't have it, but what you're doing is you're actually paying me. You're paying me real money, which the Federal Reserve know. You're paying me something that I never had. So when you look at fractional reserve banking, when you look at the loaning system, it's essentially a what they call a Ponzi scheme, or whatever they call it. I'm using the appearance of other people's money to get other people invested and invest their money, and then as long as everyone doesn't take out uh, you know, what they think that they have, then I can be rich and I'm being rich off of other people's money. And that's exactly what capitalism is. And that's exactly what fractional reserve banking is, right? So now what I want to do is talk about the history of it a little bit. And in order to do that, we have to talk about what happened with Abraham Lincoln and um, what happened in 1861 and 1862. In order to talk about that, I have to reference two things. One is the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, President James Monroe. And in that Monroe Doctrine, he discussed other Europeans' interest in the 13 colonies of North America. He also discussed, I believe it was at the same time, 1822, where the secret Treaty of Verona was read before the floor of Congress. And in the secret Treaty of Verona, it talked about the contracting parties infiltrating and overthrowing Republican forms of government and pretending to be supporters of free press, which they changed journalism into media, which is a Roman goddess. So now we see who the high contracting parties are. If they're worshiping Roman gods, then they must be Romans. And then when you look at, as an example, they specifically mentioned the overthrow of Republican forms of government. And then when you look at democracy as an example, you'll see that most of, pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme, I believe is the same thing. You'll see that most historians will credit the Romans with the first democracy. And one of the philosophies of the Romans in their democracy was entertainment and food. As long as you keep the people entertained and you keep the people fed, then they're not going to revolt against any political agendas that you have, and they're not necessarily going to even care about any political agendas that you have, because they're fed and they're entertained. And when you look at, bread and circus, exactly. And when you look at what's happening today, that's essentially what it is. People are fed and they're entertained. And most people don't care about politics, but they'll know everything about LeBron James' basketball score, but they won't even know about, as an example, what happened in 1910 off the coast of Jekyll Island. And this isn't a slight against anybody. At one point in time, I didn't know either until, 5-6 years ago, when I found more science, when I found Tashriq Bey and I found Prophet Noble Ali. This information was revealed to me, and now I see how when so-called black people, our people, talk about systematic oppression, this is the system. We have to understand the system, the origin of it, and the policies of the system, so we can see, okay, this is how it's affecting us, and this is how we can deal with it, right? So if you don't know about the secret Treaty of Verona, I went over it a little bit. Look it up for yourself. You'll see it was revealed on the floor of Congress. And the origin of democracy is with the Romans. And the word demos, as in demon, means the root word di or de means to separate, right? And then the word ocracy is derived from kratos, which means power. So it's either demon power or separate power. And when you talk about separate power, that's when people talk about the cabal or the shadow government. It's a separate group of people that are actually in power, not the people themselves. And when you look up democracy in Black's Law Dictionary and compare it to a republic, you see where a democracy is power. Essentially, when you read it, the word of is used, but the word of is a conjunction and can mean over, right? So when you read democracy, it essentially reads power over the people. When you read republic, it essentially reads the people have the power. But of course, we already know that's a play on semantics. I'm not going to go into that in depth, but I am going to keep talking about the fractional reserve banking, and that's why I had to mention President James Monroe's doctrine of 1823 and the secret Treaty of Verona that was read on the floor of Congress in 1822, because all of that is related to what happened in 1861 and 1862 with the coup d'etat within the United States Congress. And then you'll see I'll reference later in my book, Muslim versus Muslim, how it wasn't just a coup and people didn't resist. There were people that were resisting against democracy, knowing that it was unconstitutional. So those are also reference points that I suggest you look up for yourself. Don't believe anything that I'm saying. Look it up for yourself. Right. So now we're going to talk about the coup. People will say, "Oh, there wasn't a coup," and blah 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 blah. Or, people will act like people often throw out the word democratic republic well, yeah, that's no mostly it. There's no such thing as a democratic republic. That's like saying good and evil at the same time. I'm good and evil. You can't be both. It's either one or the other. Now, obviously, things aren't 100% evil and things aren't 100% good. When we talk about the majority of things, there's no such thing as a democratic republic. So here's the first reference point. This is from the Library of Congress. You see it up here where it says loc.gov. loc.gov. This is from all pages, the Daily Register, volume, and it just says volume brackets, July 6th, 1864. So we already know Civil War was what, 1861 to 1865, after they murdered Abraham Lincoln, right? So this is the reference. I also have the reference in this book right here. It's on my website, riseofthemoors.org. I'll show you this book, because sometimes these documents are hard to find, which is why I put it in the book, so that way, you don't have to go searching for it for hours and hours and hours like I did. Let me see right here. Oh, that's just Congress Adjourning Sine Die. Right here, the Daily Register. This is on page 76. See the Daily Register? I have it in red. All right, but I'm gonna read it from the printout. It's the same thing. Let's see. When you zoom in onto the Daily Register, you'll see this right here. A terrible plot discovered. A terrible plot discovered. I'm going to read a word for it. It is stated on very good authority in Washington City that Mr. Stewart has prepared a grand coup to demolish the Democratic Party and re-elect Mr. Lincoln. He has invented a splendid plot, which is to be exposed, of course, in due time, going to show that the democracy are involved in a vast conspiracy to smash things generally. It is said that 1,000 pages of evidence going to prove the existence of this terrible conspiracy has been submitted to Mr. Lincoln, and that a well-known general, once respected, has lent his name to a tissue of nonsensical slander upon members of the Democratic Party. It is no secret that a vast system of espionage, spying, has been organized all over the North by who? Clearly the South, the Southern Democrats. And proofs will soon be forthcoming that the mails are regularly tampered with to find evidence, if possible, against persons who are inimical to the administration. So they're talking about overthrowing the Republican form of government. You'll also see when you get the book, there's a book called I believe her name is Alexander Michelle, or Michelle Alexander, is called Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, in the age of colorblindness, and you'll see where the southern states, meaning the southern states during this time, 1864, 1865, 1861, 1862, 1863, during the Civil War, the southern states were predominantly Democratic states. You'll also see that a lot of the Southern Democrats were also part of the Ku Klux Klan. You will also see in the United States Supreme Court, I believe it's District of Columbia versus Heller, whereas the United States Supreme Court acknowledged that the Ku Klux Klan, and referred to them as a militia, often broke up Republican meetings, lynched Republican blacks, and murdered Republican whites. So you see how this coup is actually taking place, and you actually need to know the history and reference points as far as the things that I just mentioned regarding the Supreme Court case and these newspapers from the time to see a full picture, because it's easy to just listen to what I said. Oh, there was a coup, and then what this is unfortunately what Moors do. They'll parrot, there was a coup, there was a coup, there was a coup. But it's different when you have the newspapers from the time. It's different when you see the United States Supreme Court referencing these things. And then, for anyone that was part of our Friday classes, you'll see where I have prepared a document regarding the origins of the Ku Klux Klan and their ties to the Democratic Party, even to the point where the Klan would openly show up to Democratic elections and things like that. So the Ku Klux Klan, when you talk about the Ku Klux Klan Act, I believe, of 1870, and then when you look up the Naturalization Act and the definition of free white person in Black's Law Dictionary, fourth edition, you'll see it happen around 1870. And of course, you'll see this is after the coup. This is after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and things like that. And then when you reference, as an example, which I have here, the Proceedings and Debates of the 90th Congress, First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967, page 15641 and 15646, you'll see where the Congress in 1967, during the height of the Civil Rights Movement, this is Congress talking, not individuals with personal opinions. These are congressmen and women discussing on the floor of Congress during the height of the Civil Rights era, that with the Reconstruction Act of the 60s, when the northern states, well, it was the northern states, but it was really Democrats who did it, to fight against the Republicans of the South. They had military coups over the southern states, and this is detailed in the Proceedings and Debates of the 90th Congress, First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967, which I have right here, certified from the Library of Congress. And what I did was, for those who participated in our Friday classes, I had typed up everything word for word, because sometimes it's hard to read the small print, and I know there's a lot of elders that are interested in this information, and sometimes they need reading glasses because their eyesight isn't what it used to be. So I typed it up in Times New Roman font, and that's something that you get with the links from the Library of Congress. I just have it typed up, and then the link's available, so that way you can click on the link and see, oh, this is where it is. You can zoom in for yourself. You can see how the coup was taking place. It wasn't just, oh, there was a coup and then there was no resistance. No, the Ku Klux Klan went ravaging through the South, massacring black people, so-called blacks, obviously, massacring Republicans, because it was a Republican form of government, which relates back to the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, 1822, which goes back to the Secret Treaty of Verona, which goes back to democracy and the overthrow of the United States Congress in 1861/1862 with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, because he had the information that the Democratic Party was trying to overthrow the Union, which it is successfully did. And then you'll see right here on the next page, I believe this is the same copy. Let me see. Okay, yeah. This is same Daily Register from July 6th, 1864. Same thing. And it says, Congress adjourns sine die, which means without day. Washington, both houses of Congress adjourn sine die at 12:30 this p.m. It is believed that all the bills passed by both houses have been signed by President Lincoln. So they adjourn sine die, without day, which means they're not gonna come back. This is the same thing, the Daily Register, June 9th, 1868. Now, we already know what happened in 1868. President Abraham Lincoln established what we call the 40 acres and a mule. It was officially called the Bureau of Refugees, Abandoned Lands, and Freedmen, Pay attention. The Bureau of Refugees. The only people that are refugees are peoples with nationalities. Abandoned lands, adverse possession, and freedmen, former slaves. So not everyone was a slave, obviously. That's why it's the Bureau of Refugees. Refugees are not slaves. Abandoned lands and freedmen. Right? We know that after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, the president following him and the administration following him squandered the finances, which was gold at the time, squandered all the finances and essentially destroyed the Bureau of Refugees, Abandoned Land, and Freedmen. And you can look this all up for yourself. And I know some of you are wondering, how is this related to fractional reserve banking at all? The reason why it's related to it is because what modern con artists do is they will associate the income tax based on the 16th Amendment, which was ratified, I believe, in 1906, which clearly created no additional taxing powers of the United States Congress because Congress already had Article 1, Section 8 or Article 1, Section 10 powers to levy, assess, and collect taxes. What Abraham Lincoln did under the emergency war powers was he applied what is referred to as an income tax to fund the war effort, because at that time the United States was dealing with equity, meaning the United States dollar was actual gold and silver. So it wasn't something that they can just create like fractional reserve banking through the fiat monetary system, which the United States Treasury prints the Federal Reserve note, which is not money. So they couldn't just print gold. So they had to fund an actual war. In order to do that, they had to tax the rich. So you'll see during Abraham Lincoln's administration, there was tax brackets the way we see tax brackets today. But it was an equitable system based on emergency war powers, not just the regular administration of government. It was during a time of war. So that's why this time period is important, because pseudo historians who are essentially on the side of democracy, who are essentially on the side of destruction, which again, going back to what democracy, demolition, it's the same root word, DE. Demon, it's the same root word, DE. Most division, when you separate things, the same root word, DE, DIDE, same thing, vowels interchangeable. You see that it's separate, and it causes division, it causes destruction, it causes separation. It's the collapse of things. So that's why that's important. Now here, this is June 9th, 1868. Again, that's why I went over that time period with the squandering of the Bureau of Refugees, Abandoned Land, and Freedmen after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by the Democratic Party with help of the Ku Klux Klan, because that's what they do. This says the Democratic Platform. The subject of a platform for the national democracy in the next presidential election is now exciting much interesting discussion among party leaders here, most of whom repudiate the ideas expressed in the columns of the New York World. The Democratic politicians in Washington insist that the platform resolutions shall be few and very brief, the living issue between the parties being now reduced to the single proposition whether or not this is a white man's government. That was the entire basis of the Democratic Party. And again, when I brought up the book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow in the Age of Color Blindness, she explains in detail how the Southern Democrats switched to the Republican Party. It made it in essentially trading places. So now they're acting like the good guys. Oh, no, we're not Democrat. We're not. No, we don't believe in racism. And now this is how these policies that are quote unquote racist in origin, which obviously is not racist, are affecting our people today. And this is why most so-called blacks are Democrats today, because the system is based off placation. It is based off a false sense of hope. But anyway, read the book for yourself. Don't believe me. Don't believe anything I say. I'm a nobody, right? Anyway, so the living issue between the parties being now reduced to the single proposition whether or not this is a white man's government. Now remember, I made the statement that, this is how they're applying these policies that affect us today. A perfect example of this is, as an example, when you read the Christian Black Codes of 1724, I'll say it again. When you read the Christian Black Codes of 1724, you will see these white masters over their black slaves said slaves are prohibited from bearing arms unless they have permission from their masters or a badge. Now, that was 1724. Let's look at right now. People, mostly black people, cannot bear arms unless they have a license from the state. The word license means permission. What's the difference? Now the state is your master. Or you have a badge. You're a cop. You don't need a license. You already have the training. Or another known mark, the military. What's the difference? Another thing from the Christian Black Codes of 1724, black shall never own property. Look up a mortgage in a law dictionary. It's not ownership of property. Then when you look at the origin of mortgages, they'll lie and say it's from colonial times, the 1600s. No, it's not. It's from the mid 19th century, after Prophet Noble Drew Ali died. That's when mortgages and marriage licenses were heavily enforced. And what did Prophet Noble Drew Ali say? You'll be taxed to death. But anyway, so the Democratic Party, their main concern is whether or not this is a white man's government. On this proposition, let the fight be made, they say, and let this single issue stand out in bold relief. There is a large number of minor issues which can be settled in Fractional, small print, but the result of the approaching presidential contest must and will be determined whether this once proud republic is to be placed absolutely under Negro control. The radicals will exert themselves to raise and combat said issues of unimportant character, but the policy of the conservatives will be to hold them squarely to their platform, Negro supremacy in the South. In the North, states' rights. If they can do so, let their speakers defend this single proposition. If the Negroes of the South are to constitute the dominant party there, they will hold the balance of power between the parties at the North and thus rule the whole country. I thought we were a minority. So now you see why the Ku Klux Klan, hi my girl, in the 1870s, after 1868, once the Democratic Party took hold, was murdering black people who are clearly denationalized Moors. So now the same Democratic Party that was murdering our people, now most so-called blacks in politics are Democrats? They don't see it. And that's cool. Let me see. This is the same thing I just believe zoomed in. Yeah. But the results of the approaching presidential contest must and will determine whether this once proud republic is to be placed absolutely under Negro control. It's the same thing, just zoomed in. Right. So now we can see briefly as an overview the political climate during and after the Civil War. Obviously, 1864, the Civil War was still going on. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated a year later because he had information of the Democratic Party overthrowing the government. We could see that the Democratic Party in 1868, after Abraham Lincoln was murdered, when they claimed to have passed the 14th Amendment, but then when we read the proceedings and debates of the 90th Congress First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967, page 15641 to 15646, we see that during that time, the Reconstruction Act was essentially a military coup over the southern states. Why? Because they said that the so-called blacks or denationalized Moors, once they are freed, they will have more power in the South. And then we can see how that's related to, as an example, the war with Mexico in 1848 that had ended, and the the record from Massachusetts regarding House Resolution, I believe, is 87 or 86, where they refer to the entire West Coast as the Mauritanian races belonging to the Moorish people and their Indian associates, to whom Mexico properly belongs. So Moors didn't just get defeated. We were defeated after a series of wars. And also, when you look up the time period of the 1800s, you'll see the Barbary Wars, starting with Thomas Jefferson because he didn't want to pay the taxes to the Barbary states. And in all honesty, we weren't respecting a lot of the treaties that we made with them anyway, because under the Moroccan Empire, we still had independent states who constituted the Moroccan Empire. So although there was a sultan who was in charge of the empire, you still had the Dey of Tunis and the Bashars Tripoli, who were member states of the Moroccan Empire or the Moorish Empire, but they still had sovereign authority over their kingdoms. So whereas the Moroccan Empire had a treaty with the United States, as an example, the state of Tunis would violate that treaty and still hold U.S. citizens captive and things of that nature until a treaty was signed with them too. So you see that during that time period, it's called the Barbary Wars. During that same time period, you see Haiti revolted against Saint Dominic and the Dominican Order of Christ, which those who lost are now called Dominicans, which the Dominican Order of Christ was involved in the Inquisition and Crusades against the Moors under the authority of the popes of Rome, which were the high contracted parties of the Treaty of Secret Treaty of Verona in 1822. So we can see how these forces are still at play. You can still see how the Ku Klux Klan with their pointed hats is derived from the same outfits that the Spanish Inquisitioners wear today. If you just Google search Inquisition uniform, you'll see people in Spain today dressed up in Klan uniforms, just without the Klan patch. They have the same pointy hats. They have, and it's to commemorate the Inquisition, which was essentially Spain's war against the Moors, authorized by the popes of Rome. And this is why, what's her name, Isabella and Ferdinand of Castile and Aragon got the title Most Christian Majesty once they kicked our ancestors out of Al-Andalus, which was called the land of the Vandals, and we made it into a flourishing empire. They kicked us out. You also see with as an example, the name of Rhode Island is from the Isle of Rhodes in Italy, and you'll see the Knights of Malta, the military hospitality Knights of Malta and Rhodes. That military order of knights under the popes of Rome, Rome, they were used to fight against the Moors in Sicily. And you can just look up the Sicilian Emirate and how we brought, as an example, oranges to Sicily. And now you kind of see the beef between the Italians and the Sicilians because the Sicilians are predominantly mixed with Moors. So the Knights of Malta helped fight any Inquisition against the Moors to kick the Moors out of Sicily. And regarding the Treaty of 1886, 1887, regarding the Moorish Empire and how we were fractured during that 1800 period, Moors weren't honoring certain agreements. We're still fighting against Europeans, and then we started infighting. You also see at a point in time where the Romans, through proxy of the Spanish, were able to pay certain Moors, privateers, if you want to call them, private contractors, to fight against other Moors, which is exactly what's happening today. But anyway, back to the point. You see the coup of 1861, 1862, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the military control of the southern states because there would have been a so-called black majority of Republicans. The Ku Klux Klan is murdering black people, so-called black people who are really Moors. They're murdering white abolitionists who are really Europeans. They're murdering people of the Republican Party, and then they switch. Oh no, we're the Republicans, even though they're the one murdering the real Republicans, right? And then you'll see 1886, 1887, with the dissolution of a portion of the Moroccan Empire, with the Berlin Conference of 1886, and of course, there's a lot of wars that I'm glancing over because the main point is the fractional reserve system. But we kind of have to know the history of how we got to this point. It wasn't just these people just did this stuff. People were being murdered. People were being assassinated. In order for them to have the spiritual war that they have today, they had to first start physically. They were physically murdering people. That's what they did. That's what they do. And that has continued from the Crusades, the Inquisition, the Civil War of the 1800s, the Barbary Wars of the 1800s, oh, what a coincidence they happened at the same time. But they placate and say that the Barbary Wars ended in 1815, which it did not. And then, you know, we have the dissolution of a lot of the African kingdoms who were part of the Moroccan Empire with the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, which is when you look up any so-called African country today, you'll see their origins is in the 1800s, and then they got some type of alleged freedom from whatever European colony in the 1900s, mid 1900s, and before the 1800s, they didn't even exist. So that was the result of the Berlin Conference of 1886, 1880, excuse me, 1884, 1885, and then Allah, the creator of all things, gave the Moorish Americans a prophet in 1886 with the birth of Prophet Noble Drew Ali to tell us this is what's happening. Anyway, 1902 they created the John D. Rockefeller General Education Board, which is incorporated in Congress, the same Democratic Congress, and you'll see during the time before I talk about, actually I'll do this. You'll see in 1910. Right after they did the John D. Rockefeller thing, the Democratic Party clearly already has hold at this time. Obviously, I read the papers, and then when you read again the book, the New Jim Crow and the Age of Color Blindness by Michelle Alexander, you need that book to see what I'm talking about. Get the book. The Democratic Party took hold. They took hold with the Jim Crow era, all the way up into the Civil Rights era, and you'll see she paints a perfect picture of that. She worked with the United States Supreme Court. She worked within the legal system for years. She's of Asiatic descent. But anyway, 1910, these wealthy Europeans, which when we look up the definition of capitalism, is essentially private people who are wealthy. They control everything privately. These private wealthy people off the coast of Jekyll Island created the Federal Reserve Bank in 1910 to, I believe, 1912. And then in 1913, they created the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. And then you'll see later in 1933, after the death of Prophet Noble Drew Ali, which I have the documents from the Library of Congress, Franklin Delano Roosevelt did the fake emergency banking holiday. And you'll see later with House Resolution 5404, they caused the Great Depression by chopping off the asset of the United States dollar being gold and silver. They cut that off, and now it's just inflatable money that they can just print at will. But anyway, this is important because during that time, during the time of 1913, where Prophet Noble Drew Ali was waking Moors up, and Moors didn't believe him. Let's read this. This is Muslim versus Muslim. You can get it. riseofthemoors.org. I'm not going to read the case. I want you to get the book. But this is from, this was argued November 3rd, 1911, decided February 19th, 1912. So this is not that far from 1868. Not that far. An oligarchy or a democracy is equally unrepublican. This is from the United States Supreme Court. Each was equally hateful to the founders of our government, and each is equally subversive of the structure which they erected. And there's a bunch of case laws that they reference. Apart from the guarantee clause, all citizens of the United States may demand government in conformity with Republican principles. A pure democracy is subversive of the principles upon which the Republic is founded. For differences between a republic and democracy, see Noah Webster's dictionary. And then a bunch of cases. This is from the United States Supreme Court. Get the book. In ascertaining the meaning of the phrase Republican form of government, the debates of the Constitutional Conventions and the Federalist Papers are of great importance, if not conclusive. The framers of the Constitution recognized the distinction. Remember, D-I-D-E? Distinct means separate. The distinction between the Republican and Democratic form of government and carefully avoided the latter meaning democracy. And I'll show you this. Let me see. I just don't want to give away the reference point because I want you to get the book. So you can see it for a second. Even though I gave it away before, so it doesn't really matter. So you see, I copied and pasted the script from the case itself, which is from the United States Supreme Court during the time of Prophet Noble Drew Ali in 1912, saying that a democracy is unconstitutional. And then when you reference that back with the Daily Register of 1864, and the democracy overthrowing the republic, you can see a sequence of events. It wasn't just, oh, they overthrew and then that's it. No, right? It's a series of things. So now we have the Federal Reserve created in 1913, right, with the Federal Reserve Act. And now, as an example, let me read this. This is on page 11. This is American Constitutional Interpretation, second edition. I referenced this book earlier. This is on page 11. So this book is not by me at all. You cannot get this from my website. You have to get this on Amazon. That's where I got it. All right, page 11. Nowhere in the document, meaning the Constitution, obviously this is the constitutional interpretation. Nowhere in the document, for instance, is there specific authorization for Congress to found anything like the Federal Reserve System or even a bank to enable it to discharge its fiscal responsibilities, create a national police force, FBI, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or establish an agency like the Federal Communications Commission to regulate use of airwaves by the mass media. So now we have the unconstitutional creation of the Federal Reserve System off the coast of Jekyll Island, 1910 to 1912-ish. We have that case in the United States Supreme Court where individuals were arguing, hey, this is unconstitutional. This is unconstitutional. The United States Supreme Court agrees it's unconstitutional. The United States Supreme Court in 1912 agrees, recognizes, acknowledges that a democracy is unconstitutional. Okay. Now let's go here. Just proof. All right. So we're not going to talk about that yet. April 5th, 1933. We're going to talk about this. And then I want to see if I have. Say this is December 1933. Okay, so this one's first. This is Executive Order 6102 by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Again, certified by the Library of Congress. I have the clear protective sheet on it, but you'll see that it is a three-dimensional seal with a ribbon, three-dimensional ribbon that moves 3 dimensions. It's not a photocopy. This is real. So the clerk from the Library of Congress who sealed this prepared this document, not me. Public papers and addresses of Franklin D. Roosevelt with a special introduction and explanatory notes by President Roosevelt. Volume 2, The Year of Crisis. Didn't Noble Drew Ali warn you about this before he died? Anyway, 1933. Gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates are required to be delivered to the government. Executive Order number 6102, April 5th, 1933, by virtue of the authority vested in B by Section 5B of the Act of October 6th, 1917. See how they planned this years ago? This is 1933. They planned this in 1917. They already planned it in 1910 with the creation off of Jekyll Island of the Federal Reserve Bank. As amended by Section 2 of the Act of March 1933, so then they amended it. Okay, this is how we make our plans better. Entitled, An Act to Provide Relief in the Existing National Emergency in Banking and for Other Purposes, in which a mandatory act Congress declared that a serious emergency existed. This is the democracy is already in power. That was already established in 1912. So this isn't a constitutional government anymore. This is the Democrats acting as Republicans. Remember, Secret Treaty of Verona, 1822, the pretended supporters of democracy, the pretended supporters of Republican forms of government, the pretended supporters of the media, the pretend supporters, they're pretending. I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States of America, do declare that the said national emergency still exists, still continues to exist, and pursuant to said section, do hereby prohibit. This is where your constitutional right was violated because Article 1, Section 8, I believe, if not Article 1, Section 10, specifies that the only money in this country shall be gold and silver, coins. But this criminal is prohibiting the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates. Within the continental United States by individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations, and hereby prescribe the following regulations for carrying out the purposes of this order. So if there's an emergency, a financial emergency, why are you taking people's money away? If there is a financial emergency, why are you taking people's money away? If I'm hungry, why are you taking my food away from me? If I'm thirsty, why are you taking my water away from me? Anyway, for the purposes of this regulation, the term hoarding means the withdrawal and withholding of gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificates from the recognized and customary channels of trade. The term person means any individual, partnership, association, or corporation. Section 2, all persons, it doesn't say people. 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is the first amendment where people is no longer used. It's the word person. And then when you read the proceedings and debates of the 90th Congress, First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967, page 15641 to 15646, you see the congressmen at the time addressed the play on words that they're using. They addressed it already at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, 1867. Anyway, all persons are hereby required to deliver on or before May 1st, 1933, to a Federal Reserve Bank or a branch or agency thereof, or to any member bank of the Federal Reserve System, all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates now owned by them or coming into their ownership on or before April 28th, 1933. Now, you see the Cash for Gold store still around. You still see it. And when you look at, as an example, subsidiary companies, you'll see that these subsidiary companies have parent organizations. A lot of these parent organizations are banks. So you think you're going to trade your gold into this Cash for Gold place to benefit this individual, but this individual's business is a subsidiary of a bank. And that bank is a member bank of the Federal Reserve Bank. And then now you see why all of them have the the federal, the federal insurance, FID, whatever it's called. They're all federally insured because they're member banks. They're part of this. They're part of the system oppressing you. They're part of it, but you don't see. Yeah, FDIC, exactly. Thank you. See, someone knows what I'm talking about. Thank you. So, accept the following: such amount of gold as may be required for legitimate and customary use in industry, profession, or art within a reasonable time, including gold prior to refining and stocks of gold in reasonable amounts for the usual trade requirements of owners mining and refining such gold. Gold coin and gold certificates in amount not exceeding the average $100 belonging to any one person. So you can only keep $100. It's not funny. And gold coins having a recognized special value to collectors of rare and unusual coins. Gold coin and bullion marked or held in trust for a recognized foreign government or foreign central bank or the Bank of International Settlements. So you already know in 1971 they got rid of that, right? Gold coin and bullion licensed for other proper transaction not involving hoarding, including gold coin and bullion imported for re-export or held pending action on applications for export licenses. Section 3. Until otherwise ordered, any person becoming the owner of any gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificate after April 28th, 1933 shall, within 3 days after receipt thereof, deliver the same in the manner prescribed in Section 2, unless such gold coin, bullion, or certificates are held for any of the purposes specified in paragraph A, B, or C of Section 2, or unless such gold coin or bullion is held for purposes specified in paragraph D of Section 2, and the person holding it is, with respect to such gold coin or bullion, a licensee or applicant for a license pending action thereon. So you can't even hold your gold certificates unless you have permission from the government who's taking it from you. Claiming that there's a financial emergency, so taking away people's money is the solution. That's not the solution. Anyway, Section 4, upon receipt of gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificates delivered to it in accordance with Section 2 or 3, the Federal Reserve Bank or member bank will pay, therefore, an equivalent amount of any other form of coin or currency coined or issued under the laws of the United States. Coined. Section 5. Member banks shall deliver all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates owned or received by them, other than as exempted under this provision of Section 2, to the Federal Reserve banks of their respective districts and receive credit, or payment therefore, which is the paper, the Federal Reserve note. Jojo, can you go to the safe and get out the silver certificate?
Oh my God! You know, I literally found the one that you made, and I was looking for that.
No, not the Rise of the Moors one.
I was looking for both. It's just so funny that
Okay.
it just ended up. I was like, nah, you won't need it.
It should be in the safe. Section 6. The Secretary of the Treasury, out of the sum made available to the President by Section 501 of the Act of March 9th, 1933, will, in all proper cases, pay the reasonable cost of transportation of gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificate delivered to a member bank or Federal Reserve Bank in accordance with Section 2, 3, or 5 hereof, including the cost of insurance, blah, 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 blah. 1933, April 1933. This is December 30th of 1933. Proclamation 2070. Amending proclamations of March 6th and March 9th, 1933, and the executive order of March 10th, 1933, and all orders and regulations pursuant thereto, by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Whereas on March 6, 1933, I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, by virtue of authority vested in me by the Act of October 6, 1917, 40, Statute L. 411, as amended, issued a proclamation declaring that emergency existed and that a national banking holiday be observed. Thank you. Whereas on March 9th, 1933, I issued a proclamation continuing the terms and conditions of said proclamation of March 6, 1933 in full force and effect until further proclamation by the President. Emergency war powers. What was happening in 1933? World War I, World War II was ramping up. World War II was ramping up. Whereas on March 10th, 1933, I issued an executive order authorizing the appropriate authority having immediate supervision of banking institutions in each state. That's creating a monopoly. Or any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States to permit any banking institution not a member of the Federal Reserve System to perform any or all of its usual banking functions except as otherwise provided. Whereas the Secretary of Treasury, pursuant to authority granted by other provisions of said executive order of March 10th, 1933, has acted upon all requests for licensing of banks members of the Federal Reserve System. So it's get down and lay down. Get down and lay down. Now you got to apply. You need permission for me to hold gold and silver. You need permission for me to do business. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt is saying. What about that says free trade? Yes. What about that says free anything? You need permission for me to do something. Go ahead.
Closer to you, not to the table.
Don't throw it at me.
Yeah, at you, not the table.
What about free trade is get down or lay down? What about free trade is you need permission for me to do something? What about that is free trade and free? What about that is free capitalism? What about that is free? Anything. Oh. Whereas the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation has acted upon all applications to it for membership in the temporary Federal Deposit Insurance Fund as provided for in Section 12BY of the Federal Reserve Act as amended by Section 8 of the Act of June 6, 1933, Public Number 66, 73rd Congress, and has admitted to the said fund all applicant banks which are duly and properly qualified, and whereas it is now appropriate that the banking authority in each state and any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States should have and exercise the sole responsibility for and control over banking institutions not members of the Federal Reserve System. What about that is free? Okay. Now, therefore, I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, in order to assure that the banking authority in each state and in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States shall have and exercise the sole responsibility for and control over banking institutions which are not members of the Federal Reserve System, do hereby proclaim, order, direct, and declare that the proclamations of March 6, 1933 and March 9, 1933, and the executive order of March 10, 1933, and all orders and regulations pursuant thereto are amended, effective the first day of January 1934, to exclude from their scope banking institutions which are not members of the Federal Reserve System, provided, however, that no banking institution shall pay out any gold coin, which means you can no longer take your certificates. You can no longer take your certificates. This is a certificate. It doesn't say note. It says silver certificate at the top. You can no longer take your certificates. Notice how it does not say Federal Reserve note. It says silver certificate. You can no longer take your certificates to the bank and then they give you anything of metal. They can't do it no more, right? No banking institution shall pay out any gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificates except as authorized by the Secretary of Treasury, nor allow the withdrawal of any currency for hoarding, nor engaging in any transaction in foreign exchange except as may be undertaken for legitimate and normal businesses requirements, for reasonable traveling, and other personal requirements, and for the fulfillment of contracts entered into prior to March 6, 1933. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed, done in the city of Washington this 30th day of December, in the year of our Lord, 1933, and of the independence of the United States, the 158th Franklin D. Roosevelt, by the President William Phillips, Acting Secretary of State, number 2070. Proceedings of the 115th Congress, second session, House Resolution 5404. This House Resolution, there's a new one. There's a new one, I believe, of this year. Let me see. What is this one called? There's a new resolution. There's also a Senate resolution. Yeah, so the new one is HR 2558. There's also, so that's a House resolution. There's also a Senate bill proposing the same thing. So both houses are proposing the same thing. Why hasn't it been passed yet? You still don't get it. Anyway, I'm trying to see the date when my computer's slow. And it's really zoomed in like a lot. This one. Oh, this says May 7th, 2019. There's a newer one. Yeah. House Resolution 9157 to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. So this was presented October 7, 2022 by Mr. Mooney, the same guy that presented it in 2018. Let's read it. House Resolution 5404 and House Resolution 2558 and House Resolution 9157 of this year, last year, 2022, to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. But Roosevelt said you can't. But Roosevelt said you can't do that. In the House of Representatives, March 22nd to New Year's, March 21st, 2018, Mr. Money, of West Virginia, introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee of Financial Services, a bill to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. Be enacted, this is a bill, this wasn't passed. Be enacted by the Senate of the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, which the Senate has a similar bill. Section 1, findings. Congress finds the following. The United States dollar has lost 30% of its purchasing power since 2000 and 96% of its purchasing power since the end of the gold standard in 1913. The Federal Reserve's 2% inflation objective, that's their policy. The dollar loses half of its purchasing power every generation, or 35 years. And then when you look at 1913 and you add 35 years, there's a financial crisis. Add another 35 years, another financial crisis. Add another 35 years, another financial crisis. Add another 35 years, another one. That's every generation. And then you'll see since then, every 35 years or so, there's been a war. And then another one. And then another one. And then another one. And then another one. American families need long-term price stability. So if your objective is inflation, the prices aren't stable. To meet their household spending needs, quality of life, save money, and plan for retirement. So under the IRS, the Federal Reserve Bank, under the Federal Reserve's 2% inflation objective, you can't meet your household needs, save money, or plan for retirement. The Federal Reserve policy of long-term inflation has made American manufacturing uncompetitive, raising the cost of the United States manufacturing goods by more than 40% since 2000, compared to less than 20% in Germany and in France. Between 2000 and 2010, the United States manufacturing employment shrunk by 1/3 after holding steady for 30 years at nearly 20 million jobs. Excuse me, is that 20 million? Yeah, 20 million jobs. The American economy needs a stable dollar, fixed exchange rates, and money supply controlled by the market, meaning the people, not the government. I just showed you how the money supply was controlled by the government in 1933. The gold standard puts control of the money supply with the market instead of the Federal Reserve. Who did the Federal Reserve take the money from? People. You can't hoard it. So if they're talking about the market, who are they talking about? The people, as opposed to the government. Capitalism. So now when you look at other countries and you look at their market, what is their market? It's people outside with their stands selling their things. They control the control of money. They control it. They have it. Okay, my dates for your eggs, my sheep for your goat. Or if you want to deal with gold, okay, one sheep for 2 pieces of gold. The market's controlling the value of things. But when you take that away from the people, now they have nothing. Now the federal government controls it. That's what they did in 1933. And didn't Prophet Noble Drew Ali say money, gold, silver, and commerce belong to the people? Isn't that what Prophet Noble Drew Ali said? Now you see why he said it. The gold standard means legal tender defined by and convertible into a certain quantity of gold. Didn't Franklin Delano Roosevelt say you can't exchange your certificates for anything? Wow. Under the gold standard through 1913, so under the gold standard up until 1913, Federal Reserve Act, the United States economy grew. It grew. How is there a crisis? How is there a financial crisis if they're saying the economy was growing? At an annual average of 4%, 1/3 larger than the growth rate since then and twice the level since 2000. The International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971 did not provide for a United States dollar convertible into gold. Didn't Franklin Delano Roosevelt say you can't do that? And therefore helped cause the Great Depression and stagflation. So there wasn't a depression going on. They caused it. What was happening during 1913? World War what? One? Who are the warring parties? So when you look at World War One, you see a control of the old. You see the dissolution of empires. You see a dissolution of the old empires. The old empire, starting with the Moorish Empire. It started with us in 1800s. The Moorish Empire fell. Then what was left? The Ottoman Empire. What side was the Ottomans on? Then you look at the Sykes-Picot Agreement, World War II. Right? You see Lawrence of Arabia, what was his job? He admitted it. Lawrence of Arabia, the European who incited the Arabs to revolt against the Ottoman Empire, right? The Seljuk Turks. That's where Turkey comes from, the Turkmenistan. Arabs to fight against the Turks to do what? Lawrence of Arabia said it out of his own mouth. To divide democracy, division, demolition, to divide the Islamic bloc. That's what they called it. What was the Islamic bloc? It was blocking European trade into Asia. Why? Because the Asians had to go straight to our Arab brothers and sisters through the Ottomans, through the Silk trade, going through India, Hindustan. Now you see why the British is in India. You see why the United States is in the Philippines. You see the dealings with the Arab countries and the Arab world. Now you see the shift of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia trying to back the Chinese money with their oil as opposed to the United States dollar. You see it now? Can you see it now? You see? You see how it's affecting Moors? No, of course you don't. I'll read it again. The International Gold Exchange Standard, this is where we get the petrodollar from. It's no longer gold now, it's oil. IMF, World Bank. The United States dollar is the world reserve currency. Gaddafi was trying to end that with an African dollar, an African union by African states. Then the president of Afghanistan was siding with the Europeans, helped set up the assassination on Gaddafi, and then later turned around and said, oh, these people are actually evil. Okay. The International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971 did not provide for a United States dollar convertible into gold and therefore helped cause the Great Depression and stagflation. The Federal Reserve's trickle-down policy of expanding the money supply without no demand for it has enriched the owners of financial assets, but endangered the jobs, wages, and savings of blue-collar workers. Restoring American middle-class prosperity requires change in monetary policy authorized to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the United States Constitution. What is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5? What is it? Let's Google it. Assassination of who? John F. Kennedy. What was John F. Kennedy talking about? The gold standard. This is constitution.congress.gov/browse/article 1/section 8/clause 5. Article 1, legislative branch, section 8, powers of Congress, clause 5, money to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Wasn't John F. Kennedy talking about the gold standard. Yes, he was. Wasn't he assassinated? Yes, he was. Was John F. Kennedy talking about if the people are informed, they can't be fooled? Yes, he was. Wasn't he assassinated? Yes, he was. Didn't John F. Kennedy from the Oval Office in black and white say to the American people that there's a secret group of powerful men influencing politics? Isn't that what he said? Google it, look it up, YouTube it. Isn't that what he said? Wasn't he assassinated? You know what's also interesting? Google search President Donald Trump says 14th Amendment is unconstitutional. Come on, man. So now we see, in order for fractional reserve banking to work, they had to get rid of equity. They had to get rid of gold and silver, which is a real value, and created paper money, which is not money. This silver certificate represents the value of money. The certificate certifies that there's silver certificate. It's certifying that there's silver. It certifies that when you go to the bank and you give them this, you get silver in exchange. That's what this certifies. But this itself is not money. It's a circulating medium as opposed to carrying silver. This weighs less, weights and measures, but it represents the value of silver. They got rid of that. Right? So now let's look at this. Oh, we could look at that next. Because I mentioned the 16th Amendment in 1906. First, we will do this together. Go to riseofthemoors.org. Go to riseofthemoors.org. You'll see a bunch of tabs up top. Hover your mouse over Res Judicata. Click on modern day slavery. Click on it. You will see, as an example, the definition of license. We went over that in today's discussion. The definition of mortgage, we went over that today. Remember, mortgages and marriage licenses didn't exist until 1930s. Look it up. And now here's the definition of money from Black's Law Dictionary. In usual and ordinary acceptation, it means gold, silver, or paper money used as a circulating medium of exchange. This is paper money used as a circulating medium of exchange. It says silver certificate. The silver is the money. The certificate is the medium of exchange. So it's paper, money, silver, as a medium of exchange certificate. Jojo, you got $1 on you? Well, it's not $1. Dollar means gold. All right. The definition continues. It does not embrace notes. So money does not mean notes. Bonds, a bond is not money. Evidences of debt, a mortgage is not money. Or a loan is not money. Or other personal or real estate.
Sorry.
It's all right.
I was gonna go run errands. I didn't know if you wanted to leave the thing or
What, the monitor?
wait.
You can just wait. I'm about to wrap it up. The one at the top says silver certificate. The one at the bottom says Federal Reserve note. They look similar, don't they? That's how they trick the people. So now I'll read money again. Money. In usual and ordinary acceptation, meaning as we talk, it means gold or silver or paper money used as a circulating medium of exchange. So it only means this, silver or gold. That's it. And does not embrace notes. That says note right there. Does not embrace notes. Federal Reserve note. It doesn't. This is not money. This is not money. This is not money. Evidences of debt or other personal or real estate. Now remember, I just read House Resolution 5404. This has lost 96% of its value. So if this is 100 pennies and it lost 96%, how much is this worth? It's worth 4 pennies. What is the value of this? The value of this is the paper it's made of and the ink it's made of. That's it. It cost 1 penny to produce. I think it's around. Actually, it might be less than a penny. I think it's like 4 cents. It's not 4 cents. 0.4 cents. Right? Or maybe it is a penny to print this and to print the $100 bill. So it doesn't cost them anything to print a 1 or a 100. It costs the same amount. It's worthless.
So,
and by definition, this is not money.
Well, a $100 bill would really cost $4, no?
Exactly. So a $1 bill is really 4 pennies.
Wild.
Because if it lost 90%, 96% of its value since the end of the gold standard, that means $1 is 4 pennies. So you're working a 9 to 5 for what? For something that they can print at will. That's called peonage. And then when we're dealing with the fractional reserve system, where they only keep 10% of the actual asset, right? You become a debt slave. That's called peonage. Because now you have to work for this, which they can print at will. So remember, they said that flooding the system by supplying the system with no demand for it, it just enriches the people who print it and endangers your life. Because now there's inflation. Now you can't afford anything. Now you can't pay your bills. Now you're in more debt. Which means what? The next generation is going to have to suffer because you can't properly provide for your children. So now they're going to suffer. And then they're going to grow up ignorant. And then they're going to fight a rich man's war for oil, for opium, to control other people's natural resources. And then they're going to call those people terrorists for fighting for their own homeland, for fighting for their liberation, for fighting for their children, for fighting for their wives. They're going to be called terrorists on their own homeland. Peonage. It's called debt slavery. That's what peonage is. Debt slavery. They print this at will. The United States Treasury prints this at will. It costs nothing. And then when you look at the Rex 84 plan, and Rockefeller talked about illimitable resources. This is illimitable, without limit. It's paper. They can print as much as they want. And then Google search how much they burn. Millions of this. They burn it. Millions. They burn it. And you'll see before COVID, they pumped $1.2 trillion into the system with no demand for it. That causes inflation. You don't know that, so they tell you COVID caused inflation. How does a sickness cause inflation? It doesn't. They just use something bad's happening. That's why bad stuff is happening. Meaning they don't want you to look at, they just printed 1.2 trillion for what? I didn't get none of it. When did we get any of that? Oh, it's the trickle-down policy that the congressman was talking about. You know what the trickle-down policy is? Oh, you give money to the rich and eventually it'll trickle down to the poor. When does that happen? During the bailouts, during COVID, who did they bail out? Airports. How many of you own an airport? They bailed out They build out the billionaires. Why? Because that's what capitalism is about. It's about fractional reserve banking to keep the poor poor and keep the rich rich. And then there's hoops that you jump to fight your way to the top through capitalism. Because they're using your public greed against you. Isn't that exactly what John D. Rockefeller talked about? Isn't that exactly what he talked about? Isn't that exactly what he said? We're going to use the public greed against them, and we're just going to give them limited amounts of paper. Oh, yeah, public greed. Yeah. We're going to use this little bit of gold that we took from Germany. Say, oh, yeah, we have real money, and they really don't. You don't care about that. Note, a unilateral, meaning is one way, instrument containing an express and absolute promise of the signer. Who signed this? Who signed this note? The Treasurer of the United States. They signed it. So they promised to pay you. So the promise to pay a specified person, the holder of it, or order, or bearer, a definite sum of money at a specified time. But didn't Franklin Delano Roosevelt say you can't exchange this for money? You can't get gold and silver out of it? So it's worthless, right? An abstract, a memorandum, an informal statement in writing. It's an informal statement. You know when you was in middle school, elementary school, whatever, and someone gave you a cookie and you ripped a piece of paper and said, I owe you? That's informal. So now, when you look up note, and it says it's unilateral instrument, whereas the person who signed it promises to do something for someone else. When have you ever went to the bank and got gold or silver from this? Never, which means what? They're not living by their promise. Because that was just a trick, cash for gold. Yeah, you ain't getting nothing. Just more peonage, more debt. And then they convinced you, oh yeah, you take out a loan, which is more debt, to buy assets, which the debt is now securitized by the asset. So you still have all the liability. The banks have none because they don't have any money. They never gave it to you. You think you're trading real estate when you're not. You're trading promises. And then when you look at the banking crash in 2008, what were they doing? They were bundling mortgages, rating them at higher AAA mortgages. AAA? Everything was getting AAA rating. They were creating nothing. Inflation. It's air. They're blowing in air. Inflate air, balloons. And then what? What they call it? The market bubble. And then what they say? The bubble popped. Why? It's air. It's empty promises. Empty promise. It's an empty IOU. You get nothing. You get nothing. Ever. Nothing ever. What do you get? Nothing. You get nothing. Oh, I love capitalism because you can work hard and get. No, you can. No, you don't work hard. You work hard and get nothing. And then they pass on the wealth to whoever they want to pass it on to. The people that submit. Submit to the system. Submit to the fraud. Agree to the fraud. Most people feel something's wrong, but they don't know exactly what's wrong. They say money's the root of all evil. No, it's not. This ain't money. Anyway. Promissory note, a promise or engagement in writing, they wrote on this, to pay a specified sum at a time therein limited or on demand or at sight to a person therein named or to his order or bearer. So you bear this, you hold it, you're the holder. You're the holder in due course. So in the course of you exchanging in the course of you exchanging this to the bank, they're supposed to give you money in return. They never do. So it's an empty promise. Contract, a promissory agreement. They never fulfill their agreement. Consideration. Consideration means something which is of value in the eyes of the law. But didn't I just read to you from Congress that this lost 96% of this value? So in the eyes of the law, Congress, the legislative branch, this is worth 4%. So is this of value? No. So can this be consideration? Lawful consideration? No. Which means no contract is valid. The loan you got, not valid. The mortgage you got, not valid. Car note you got, not valid. Credit card, not valid. Debit account, not valid. Savings account, not valid. Didn't the congressman just say, in order to give the people wealth, we need gold and silver? In order to stabilize their families, we need gold and silver. In order to stabilize their savings, we need gold and silver. But look, here's the trick. Nothing is consideration that is not regarded as such by both parties. So now it's a contract. By law, it's worthless. But if you think it is, you think it does have value, well, that's up to you. So now the people's interest in it is what gives it value, and that's it. That's it. So you think they're printing, oh, you got a $200,000 loan? No, you didn't. You got paper, and they never even gave you the paper. Now they're trying to switch everything into digital, so they don't got to print this no more. So now it's less work for them. But you think, oh, this is the new wave. I'm going to invest in Bitcoin and become a million. Okay. Don't worry. There's more. Legal consideration. One recognized or permitted by law as valid and lawful, as distinguished from such as are illegal or immoral. The term is sometimes used as equivalent to good or sufficient consideration. Pay, to discharge a debt, to deliver to a creditor the value of a debt, either in money or in goods, for his acceptance. Nolan Company versus Maryland Casualties. A debt is not paid by the giving of a note. A note is simply a promise to pay and not payment. Fidelity Savings Banks versus Grimes. A check payable in notes is a altered instrument and void. A check payable in notes. I'm going to cash my check. A check payable in notes is an altered instrument and void. Jamal, you're making this up. Okay. Library of Congress, certified by the Library of Congress. United States Supreme Court. Don E. Williams versus the IRS. Don E. Williams versus the IRS. Page 570, October term, 1976. Opinion of the court. Opinion of the United States Supreme Court. Is that Jamal's opinion? No. Is that riseofthemoors.org's opinion? No. Is that the opinion of the Rise of the Moors organization? No. This is the opinion of the United States Supreme Court. A promissory note. This. A promissory note cannot properly be equated with a check. Remember, a check payable in notes is an alternate instrument and void. I'll read it again. A promissory note cannot properly be equated with a check, since a note, even when payable on demand and fully secured, is still only a promise to pay. So you can't exchange a promise to pay with another promise to pay. A check is a promise to pay. You can't exchange a promise to pay with another promise to pay, meaning a note. So you can't exchange a check for a note. You can't exchange a check for this. I'll read it again. A promissory note cannot properly be equated with a check, since a note, even when payable on demand and fully secured, is still only a promise to pay, whereas a check is a direction to the bank for immediate payment, is a medium of exchange, and is treated for federal tax purposes as a conditional payment of cash. It's conditional. Meaning what? Meaning what? What does that mean? They're not accepting it as real money because it's not. They're just accepting it as a conditional payment of taxes so that way this system can keep maintaining the system of you believing it's money and you believing you owe them anything when they can just print it at will. Okay, so since we're talking about taxes, let's talk about taxes. This is House Resolution 25, certified by the Library of Congress. This has been introduced to the floor of Congress since at least 1999. It's been introduced in 2009. It's been introduced in 2018, and I believe it's been reintroduced again this year. This is from 2019. Let me show you the seal first. Rosella Delgado Jones, Assistant Business Enterprise Officer, Office of Business Enterprise, Library of Congress, 101 Independence Avenue, SE, Washington, D.C. 2054-4917. Telephone number 202-707-5650. Website www.loc.gov. Duplication services at loc.gov. Office of Business Enterprise Duplication Services section. This is to certify that the online U.S. legislative information collection of the Library of Congress contains proceedings of the 116th Congress first session, and that the attached downloaded and printed copies of pages 1 to 8 of House Resolution 25 to promote freedom, fairness, and economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, and enacting a national sales tax to be administered primarily by the states, January 3rd, 2019, are a true representation from that work, and witness thereof. The seal of the Library of Congress is affixed hereto on July 15th, 2019 by Rosalina Delgado Jones. See the seal with the ribbon? See how it's 3 dimensions? See how it's bonded? Meaning I didn't add or alter anything? Meaning this is from Congress? 116th Congress, first session, House Resolution 25. To promote freedom, fairness, and economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, and enacting a national sales tax to be administered primarily by the states. And the House of Representatives, January 3rd, 2019, Mr. Woodall for himself, Mr. Banks, Mr. Bill Reckes, Mr. Bishop of Utah, Mr. Brooks of Alabama, Mr. Carter of Texas, Mr. Cobut, Mr. Conway, Mr. Desjarlis, Mr. Duncan, Mrs. Fox of North Carolina, Mr. Gates, Mr. Graves of Georgia, Mr. Heiss of Georgia, Mr. King of Iowa, Mr. Lord Milk, Mr. Lucas, Mr. Massey, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Posey, Mr. David P. Rowe of Tennessee, Mr. Whitman, Mr. Yoho, Mr. Young, Mr. Collins of Georgia, and Mr. Wahlberg introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. So this is how many congressmen and women know about this. And then it was introduced to the floor, meaning all of Congress knows about it. The entire House of Representatives, how many people is that? 456? 456 congressmen and women know about this. You don't? And it was reintroduced 2022. You don't know about this? A bill to promote freedom, fairness, and economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, and enacting a national sales tax to be administered primarily by the states. Number 1, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1, short title, table of context. We're going to skip the table of context. We're going to go to section 2. Congressional findings. A, findings related to federal income tax. Congress finds federal income tax, 1, retards economic growth and has reduced the standard of living of the American public. So, in this capital system, I'm going to have a business. And guess what that business has to pay? State, federal taxes. Then you have employment tax. Then guess what you also have to pay? Excise, car tax, house tax, sales tax. What else you got to pay? What other tax? Didn't Prof. Noble Darley say you're going to be taxed to death? Retards economic growth and has reduced the standard of living of the American public, impedes the international competitiveness of the United States industry, reduces savings and investment in the United States by taxing income multiple times. So you can't save your money. You're going to work 40 hours a week, 52 hours a week, overtime, extra hard overtime. You're going to go home to your kids, your children acting crazy. You're going to go home and have to deal with your family. You're going to have to pay bills. You just worked 40, 50, 70 hours a week. You're tired and exhausted. You can't even save money. Slows the capital formation necessary for real wages to steadily increase. Why? Because the more you make, the more they're going to tax you, stupid. Not you, obviously. The more you make, the more they're going to tax you. Oh, tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich. How much taxes does Donald Trump pay? Isn't he rich? He's a billionaire. He paid $340 in taxes. How much do you pay? Oh, it's because he understands the tax code. It's because he's intelligent. Come on. You believe that? You believe intelligence alone is the reason he's just intelligent. Come on. Let's be serious. Lowers productivity. Imposes unacceptable and unnecessary administrative and compliance costs on individual and business taxpayers. So you can't have a business because it raises your compliance cost. You have to comply to them. It's gonna raise your cost. It's gonna cost more for you to do business. Is unfair and inequitable. That's simple. I don't need to explain that. Unnecessarily unnecessarily, which means it's not necessary, unnecessarily intrudes upon the privacy and civil rights of United States citizens. Weren't black people marching for 20 years since the 40s to the 60s to the early 70s for civil rights? Why aren't black people talking about this then? Because it what? Unnecessarily intrudes upon the privacy and civil rights of United States citizens. Hides the true cost of government by embedding taxes in the cost of everything Americans buy. So you don't even know what it really takes to run the government. You don't even know. You're just being taxed. You don't even care. Sales tax, car tax, loan. You got to pay a tax on the loan, business tax. You got to hire someone. You get taxed. You go to sleep. You get taxed. You wake up. You get taxed. You go to work. Taxed. You don't even know what you're paying for. It's crazy. You know what's ridiculous? The United States government has shut down under several presidents, and their excuse is lack of money. Nobody said, wait a minute. No one said, wait, I paid my taxes. What do you mean lack of money? I'm over here struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, and you're saying you're broke? You took 40% of my wages. It was 37% they could take. You're not mad. You're not upset at all. You're just, oh yeah, just pay my taxes for the roads. The roads still got potholes in it. Oh yeah, it paid for the roads. When they print it, so they print as much as they want. They just gave Ukraine 1.2 billion. Never mind. We won't talk about the trillions of dollars of debt they're in. But anyway, who are they in debt to? We don't got to talk about that. They just gave Ukraine 1.2 billion. This pothole's on my street since I was 8. You think your tax dollars are going to? So they print as much as they want. The United States Treasury prints as much as they want. They just print it. But you think you have to work 50, anything more than you feel like, or that is necessary. You have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week and then get taxed for the roads when they print as much as they want. That makes sense to you? And then millions of it gets burned because they printed George Washington's face on it twice. The ink is a little off. The ink is a little discolored, and they burn it. Look it up. Matter of fact, let's look it up. Let's just look it up. This is from www.theaverage.com. This is Microsoft Bing, bing.com. I Google search faulty dollars get burned. The first thing that popped up is U.S. government forced to burn $3 billion in faulty banknotes. So they print as much as they want. They burn 3 billion of it, and you think your hard-earned paper that you call money, that you struggle day in and day out, you got to wake up early, you got to beat traffic, you only get an hour break, you're tired, you don't want to go there. You think that they take money for the roads and the schools when they burn $3 billion, they just burn it. You believe that. Okay. Let's do this. How is the USD made? How is it made? Let's see how it's made. It talks about the Coinage Act of 1792. That's from Wikipedia. Let's see. Dollar.com. Let's see if we can find a governmental website. Let's go to the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Treasury. So I Googled how is the USD made, U.S. Treasury. Okay. Home.treasury.gov. Let's click on that. Let's see what that says. While that's loading, we'll look for something else. Let's see what we can find. This wasn't pre-planned. So this is U.S. Department of Treasury. This is the home page. It just says U.S. currency is produced by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Engraving and printing. Printing is in the name, so let's click on that. And U.S. coins are produced by the U.S. Mint. So notice how they say U.S. currency is produced by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And U.S. coins, separation, are produced by the U.S. Mint. Both organizations are bureaus of the U.S. Department of Treasury. Okay, so now I clicked on the home.treasury.gov/services/currency and coins page. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing is a clickable link. I clicked on that, and now I'm at the www.bep.gov. This is the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Let's see what I can find. It doesn't say anything. Search. How is USD made? So there's a search block on the Bureau of Engraving and Printing's website. A link, the buck starts here, how money is made. www.bep.gov/currency/how/money. Excuse me, /how-money-is-made. The buck starts here, how money is made. This is from, again, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, which is a bureau of the U.S. Treasury. It says, since 1862, has been entrusted with the manufacturing of the nation's currency. All U.S. currency is printed. All U.S. currency is printed at our facility in Washington, D.C., and at our facility in Fort Worth, Texas. In addition to manufacturing U.S. paper currency, the BEP also prints a variety of U.S. government security documents. Now let's look up the definition of printing. Printing, printing. Printing definition. Printing. The production of books, newspapers, and other printed materials. Handwriting in which the letters are written separately rather than being joined together. Printing is a process for mass reproducing text and images using a master form or template. The earliest non-paper products involving printing, including cylinder seals and objects such as, and then it doesn't continue. This is just a brief Wikipedia link. Matter of fact, let's click on it since it's about printing. This is from Wikipedia. So the United States government, the United States Treasury, in its Bureau of Engraving and Printing, admits that the US dollar is printed. So why are you working for it? Printing is a process for mass reproducing text and images using a master form or template. The earliest non-paper products involving printing include cylinder seals and other objects such as Cyrus cylinders and cylinders of Nabonidus. The earliest known form of printing as applied to paper was woodblock printing, which appeared in China before 220 AD for cloth printing. However, it would not be applied to paper until the 17th century. Later developments in printing technology includes the movable type invented by B.I. Shang around 1040 AD and printing press invented by Jonas Gutenberg in the 15th century. The technology of printing played a key role in the development of the Renaissance and the scientific revolution and laid the material basis for a modern knowledge based economy and the spread of learning to the masses. Printing. So, the United States Treasury prints as much paper as they want, and you think that you have to pay taxes for the roads and the schools. Meanwhile, Congress is admitting that by ending the gold standard, it caused the Great Depression. Congress is admitting that by taxing you, let's just continue to read the taxes part. Unnecessarily intrudes upon the privacy and civil rights of United States citizens. Hides the true cost of government by embedding taxes into the cost of everything Americans buy. Is not being complied with at satisfactory levels and therefore raises the tax burden on law-abiding citizens. A prime example is Donald Trump made $1 billion and only paid $300 in taxes. And then got on a presidential debate with him and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton brought up his tax break, and Donald Trump said, well, the same people that support you, all your donors, they use the same tax system that I use, which is broken, by the way. But mind you, your entire time in government, you did nothing to change it. And you're not going to do anything to change it. And guess what she did? Kept her mouth shut. She didn't say, that's not, you're lying. She kept her mouth shut. Yeah. Donald Trump is racist. Okay. Impedes upward social mobility. So all these people, look, notice how all the Forex traders are gone. Notice how all the Bitcoin promoters and blockchain technology promoters are gone. The Moors that were talking about that 2-3 years ago, they're all quiet. They're gone. They don't even talk about it anymore. Oh, you invest in this. But the United States dollar is no longer convertible in gold on the international market. So why are you investing in TradeX or whatever it's called? Forex, foreign exchange. If the USD is not exchangeable in gold, what are you investing in? More paper? Meanwhile, China, Russia, all of Africa, they're going to the gold standard, but you're still using paper. You still don't get it? And notice how all the Forex people on Instagram talking, oh, Jamal's just hating. Jamal just doesn't understand blockchain technology, even though there's a more Leonidas Jabir Bey who had Bitcoin. One day had whatever amount of money he put in it. The next day had $96,000 in it in this unhackable blockchain technology and couldn't withdraw a dime. But his Bit wallet was full of money. And then all these people are surprised. Oh, this new guy, he created this fake market because it's easy to create a fake market. If all 80 was 80 here, 10 people, let's say 100 because it's 83 and 17. Let's say there's 100 people here, right? We all say, okay, we're going to create this more coin. And I trade it to you for $2. You trade it to the next more for $4. And they trade it to the next more for $100. And they create it to the next more for $20 or $200. We just created a value of nothing. We just created a market out of nothing. And now other people are going to see, oh, those Moors are trading that more coin for $200. I want to invest. And guess what they do? They pull out the rug. And that's exactly what this person did. And the blockchain technology. You're still being tricked by just regular basic thinking. You're still being played. And you can look this up. Because again, we're talking about fractional reserve banking. All of this is related to fractional reserve banking and the fact that they're just giving you credit. They're giving you a promise and they're not delivering on that promise, right? When you look up, Harvard University did a study that proves that so-called black people have more or higher rates of what's it called? Higher insurance rates on loans. So the average is about 5 to 6% of percentage that you get on a loan. Black people are two times more likely to, not 2 times more likely, excuse me. From Harvard University said the loans that black people get are 1.4% higher than everyone else, which means if a so-called European takes out a $200,000 loan, we're paying more interest on that just because of the color of our skin. And this is why Michelle Alexander wrote the book of The new Jim Crow and the age of colorblindness, because people keep saying the laws are racist, and they keep saying, no, it's not. It applies to white people too. But they're not talking about that. They're not talking about that part. They're not talking about the history of mortgages and how it only applied to black people and how black people were paying way higher interest rates and the banks knew we weren't able to pay it. And this is why black ownership of property, so-called black, we already know they're denationalized more, is so low, and it's been so low, and it's going to stay so low. Same thing with businesses and taxes. It's the same thing. It's systematic. That's fractional reserve banking. So you're only getting a fraction. You think you're getting the real deal. You're only getting a fraction. And if you think for a second that these people don't know, I just read what Congress is saying this. The Supreme Court is saying this. I'm not saying this. This is from the U.S. Treasury's website. I'm not saying this. Those case laws I read from, these are from court cases. I'm not saying this. You think these people don't know? Okay. Just look, whatever city you're in, look it up. Look up how many millions of dollars does the federal government give your city? Now count the cities of the United States. And you think your tax money is utilized at all when they just print it? You still don't get it? How do you not get it? I understand. We all started from a point of not knowing. Now the information is being presented to you. Now you know. You must get it. You have to get it. It's either you don't care or you justify it. You think it's so. You think this is acceptable. And the only way you think this is acceptable is because of your own greed. You want a stake in this market. You think capitalism is going to work for you. You think by going to these banks and being in debt is going to work for you. Just for you to then sharecrop, rent to someone else, so that way you're taking money from them to pay someone else, so that way you can have this illusion of, oh, I have this property. You think that's okay? Let's keep reading what the United States Congress said. Impedes upward social mobility. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, they're gonna tax you based on your bracket. So you ain't making much. And then since you're part of the system, you have to then utilize the system against other people. Okay, so now since I owe this person money, I got to collect money from other people. This is why in the Quran it says usury is forbidden, because this is what it creates. Findings related to the federal payroll taxes. Congress finds the following. Findings related to federal payroll taxes. Congress finds further that the Social Security and Medicare payroll taxes and self-employment taxes, 1, raises the cost of employment, 2, destroys jobs and causes unemployment, and 3, have a disproportionately adverse impact upon lower income Americans. Who do you think they're talking about? They're talking about us. Findings related to Federal Reserve, estate, and gift taxes. Congress finds further that the federal estate and gift taxes, 1, force family businesses and farms to be sold by the family to pay such tax. Remember, Christian Black Codes of 1724, blacks can't pass their property down to their loved ones and their children and their heirs. 2, discourages capital formation and entrepreneurship. So again, it discourages capital formation and discourages entrepreneurship. Number 3, it fosters the continued dominance of large enterprises over small family-owned companies and farms. And 4, imposes unacceptably high tax planning costs on small businesses and farms. And that is fractional reserve banking. That is capitalism. That is what the United States democracy has sought out to do in 1822. That is what's happening today. That is part of the systematic oppression that we as a people are facing under the guise of this system is not racist. The laws apply to everybody. Meanwhile, they're doing backdoor deals. This is why every time you apply for anything, you apply for a loan, you apply for a house, you apply for Section 8, you apply for EBT, you apply for a job, you apply for anything, they ask you, what is your race? So that way they're not negatively affecting their people. That way they know which bracket to put you in. Oh, what's your area code? What area you live in? Because they already separated. As an example, when you look at the city of Providence, you look at the South Side, where the majority of so-called black people are. That is separated into 2 wards. So now they can never have political strength because it's 2 separate wards. They're divided. That's a strategy. Look it up. Right? So now we know you live in this area based on your area code. We know where you live. We know the economics of your area. We know based on this credit score what you can and can't afford, and now we're going to manipulate you according to that. And our people still don't get it. If it didn't matter what you were, why do you have to put your race? This is how it's systematic. They seat alone, John Smith, because you got a European slave name. Okay, what is John Smith's race? Black, put him in the black section. Automatically 1.4% higher interest rates on any loan. Put him in that section. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So now, yeah, you can apply for the $200,000 loan just like the so-called white man. But the white man's going to get 1.2% interest rate fixed. Even if it's not fixed, 1.2, you're going to get 7.8. Is that fair? How do you prove that? This is private loans. So now you can't prove it. So now, racism doesn't exist. You have the same economic opportunity we have in this capitalist system, black man. Why can't you pull yourself up by your bootstraps even though everything is disproportionately impacting you? You still don't get it. Why don't you get it? You're intelligent enough to get it. Our people are intelligent enough to understand this stuff. I've seen my people play fantasy football leagues and stuff like that, and they know the score of this dude from 1786, and they know his shoe size in 2001, and they know what jersey number he had when he was in middle school, and they know which blade of grass he tripped on when he was 2 years old. You have the ability to memorize information. You can learn this. You can learn what's up against you so that way you can figure out with your people how to defend yourself. You can learn this. It's not hard. It's not difficult either. There's a lot of information, yes, but it's not hard. And don't allow how your teachers in elementary school and middle school and high school fostered this essentially hatred of knowledge to the point where you reject knowledge. Don't allow that to affect you. There's information that's actually useful to you. Forget about what you learned about Edgar Allan Poe. Forget about what you learned about Greek mythology. That's not going to help you. It's not. At all. Don't focus on being another basketball player. Don't do it. Don't focus on being another rapper. Don't do it. It's a saturated market. Don't do it. It's overly saturated. Don't do it. You can learn this information. It's not hard. Same way you're able to gossip about what TV show's on is the same way you can read a book. Or it's the same way you can listen to a video like this and then cross-reference what I said. Because it's not me saying it. The same way other people come together and put their nation first, we can come together and put our nation first. Our people always like to talk about little Chinatown. Look at them. Look at what they're doing. They're coming together. They're pooling their resources. You know what else? You know what else they do? They have an entire government that talks to the United States government, and they have treaty tax benefits. Whereas when these Chinese nationals come here, look at Chinatown in New York. Their Chinese government is speaking to, as an example, Donald Trump. There's a whole video, love you too. There's a whole video of Donald Trump running for president. China. A whole joke of him saying China and different China. Guess what the Chinese people are doing? They're advocating for their people. That's what they're doing politically. They're not saying, oh, little Young Sue, be a rapper. Be little Young Sue and rap about drill and drugs. Be little Sung Lee and twerk on pole. Go on OnlyFans and show your little Chinese body. They're not saying that. They're not doing that. They're not promoting that at all. They're advocating for Chinese people's rights. So when the Chinese people come here and they do business and the IRS is saying, hey, you owe me money, guess what they say? Nope. Here's your IRS form with my treaty that my Chinese government has saying I'm tax exempt, or I have a tax break, or I have a tax this, I have a tax that. You can't tax me. I keep 100% of my paycheck. Leave me alone. And then the IRS sees, okay, this Chinese national is supported by the Chinese military of 2.3 million people. Okay, we'll respect that. They don't have a nation of rappers. They don't have a community of rappers. They don't have a community of pastors. They don't have a community of ball players. They don't have a community of football players. They don't have a community of comedians. We can do it. You just can't be scared. We're supposed to be upright, independent, and fearless. You just can't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. Who? If you give up on yourself, who do you have? What do you have? Remember, Allah helps those who help themselves. So if Allah sees you giving up on yourself, you think Allah is going to help you? When Allah told you, I'm gonna put you through test to see. I want to see if you truly believe. That's why Allah says strive. Struggle. Change your conditions, and I will help you through that. Just don't give up. Be patient. Respect your brother and your sister. Speak kindness to your brother and sister. When doing business with your brother and sister, have fair dealings. Don't conduct usury. Don't do it. There's Moors that can tell you when they borrowed money from the Rise of the Moors organization to help their business or to pay whatever it is that they needed to pay. There was zero insurance. There was zero interest. It was, here's the money. If you loan 700, all you owe me is 700. That's it. And ask the Moors, oh, when you borrowed money from Rise of the Moors or from Jamal, did he forgive any of the debt? Oh yeah, he forgave the X amount. I didn't have to pay it. That was it. Doesn't the Quran talk about that? Forgiving a debt is a good deed. And guess what that does to society? It helps promote society. It helps promote the economic interests of our society. If everybody's in debt under capitalism, under fractional reserve banking, then the quality of life is low. That's a result of bad dealings amongst your fellow nationals. We can get out of this. Listen, I was doing a lecture in Providence, south side of Providence, and I think it was it here? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was in Providence. But I said, don't raise your hand. But how many of you in here have sold weed before? People was laughing. Oh, yeah, I can do a little bit of this, a little of that. I said, okay. And when you go to Federal Hill or when you go to College Town, don't you tax the white boys? So whatever price you sell an eighth for, when you sell it to the white people, don't the price go up? They was all laughing. Yeah, these white boys are stupid. That's what we do, da. And then I said, if you don't think these Europeans are doing the same thing when we apply for loans, hold on, my phone's gonna die. When we apply for loans, when we apply for mortgages, when we apply to buy a car, if you don't think they're doing the same exact thing to us, we're doing it with weed. If you don't think they're doing that with billions and millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're out of our minds. And that is exactly why, as an example, when the United States broke away from the British in their Articles of Association, in their Articles of Confederation, they said, as European nationalists, in the interest of our own nation, we're only going to do business with each other. We can cancel Kanye West, but we can't cancel our oppressor, can we? Yes, we can. Stop being afraid. Think for yourself. We can do it. We absolutely can do it. And I leave y'all with peace.